All right, tonight, segment 12, and this will be Daniel chapter 8. This is Daniel's second vision. It'll be the third, what I call the third end time prophecy, the first being the vision of the dream of Nebuchadnezzar. The second was chapter 7, and tonight we'll go into chapter 8. Now we'll do this in one night, one session. Chapter 9 is going to be at least 2 sessions. As I've been going through it, I'm thinking it actually may be 3 sessions as we get into the prophecy of the 70 weeks. But it'll be at least 2 segments. But this one will just be 1 session tonight. As we go to chapter 8, if you would like, you can turn in your Bible to Daniel chapter 8. And if you have a syllabus, a lot of what I'm covering tonight is in the syllabus. And you can turn in your syllabus to page 56. 56 of your syllabus, Daniel chapter 8. And what I'd like to do the same thing I did with chapter 7. I'd like to just read the entire chapter and then come back and look over different aspects of this chapter. So here we go. Daniel chapter 8, starting in verse 1. In the 3rd year of the reign of Belshazzar, the king, a vision appeared to me, Daniel, subsequent to the one which appeared to me previously. I looked in the vision, and while I was looking, I was in the citadel of Susa, which is in the province of Elam, and I looked in the vision, and I myself was beside the Ulai Canal. Then I lifted up my eyes and looked. And behold, a ram which had 2 horns was standing in front of the canal. Now, the 2 horns were long, but one was longer than the other, with the longer one coming up last. I saw the ram butting westward, northward, southward, and no other beast could stand before him, nor was there anyone to rescue from his power. But he did as he pleased and magnified himself. While I was observing, behold, a male goat was coming from the west over the surface of the whole earth without touching the ground. And the goat had a conspicuous horn between his eyes. He came up to the ram that had the 2 horns, which I had seen standing in the front of the canal, and rushed at him in his mighty wrath. I saw him come beside the ram, and he was enraged at him. And he struck the ram and shattered his 2 horns. And the ram had no strength to withstand him. So he hurled him to the ground and trampled on him, and there was none to rescue the ram from his power. Then the male goat magnified himself exceedingly. But as soon as he was mighty, the large horn was broken, and in its place there came up 4 conspicuous horns toward the 4 winds of heaven. Out of one of them came forth a rather small horn, which grew exceedingly great toward the south, toward the east, and toward the beautiful land. Verse 10. It grew up to the host of heaven and caused some of the host and some of the stars to fall to the earth, and it trampled them down. It even magnified itself to be equal with the commander of the host, and it removed the regular sacrifice from him, and the place of his sanctuary was thrown down. And on account of transgression, the host will be given over to the horn along with the regular sacrifice, and it will fling truth to the ground and perform its will and prosper. Then I heard a holy one speaking, and another holy one said to that particular one who was speaking, how long will the vision about the regular sacrifice apply, while the transgression causes horror, so as to allow both the holy place and the host to be trampled. And he said to me, for 2,300 evenings and mornings, then the holy place will be restored. When I, Daniel, had seen the vision, I sought to understand it. And behold, standing before me was one who looked like a man. And I heard a voice of the man between the banks of Ulai. And he called out and said, Gabriel, give this man an understanding of the vision. So he came near to where I was standing. And when he came, I was frightened and fell on my face. But he said to me, Son of man, understand that the vision pertains to the time of the end. Now, while he was talking with me, I sank into a deep sleep with my face to the ground. But he touched me and made me stand upright. He said, behold, I'm going to let you know what will occur at the final period of the indignation. For it pertains to the appointed time of the end. The ram which you saw with the two horns represents the kings of Media and Persia. The shaggy goat represents the kingdom of Greece, and the large horn that is between his eyes is the first king. The broken horn and the four horns that rose in its place represent four kingdoms which will arise from his nation, although not with his power. In the latter period of their rule, when the transgressors have run their course, a king will arise, insolent and skilled in intrigue. His power will be mighty, but not by his own power. And he will destroy to an extraordinary degree and prosper and perform his will. He will destroy mighty men and the holy people. And through his shrewdness, he will cause deceit to succeed by his influence. And he will magnify himself in his heart. And he will destroy many while they are at ease. He will even oppose the prince of princes, but he will be broken without human agency. The vision of the evening and mornings, which has been told, is true. But keep the vision secret, for it pertains to many days in the future. Then I, Daniel, was exhausted and sick for days. Then I got up again and carried on the king's business. But I was astounded at the vision, and there was none to explain it. Okay, so that is chapter 8. Now, there's still many things I could tell you. I don't know for sure about this, and I don't know anything for sure, but I'm going to give you the best understanding of what I know at this time of this vision of Daniel. So let's start. Verse 1. Daniel 8:1. In the third year of the reign of Belshazzar, the king, a vision appeared to me subsequent to the one which had appeared to me previously. So when we looked at chapter 7, it was the first year. This vision is in the third year of the reign of Belshazzar. That vision we saw in chapter 7 was around the first year of Belshazzar, which would have been somewhere around 550 BC or so. And that says, here it says, the king appeared subsequent to the one which appeared to me previously. That vision that appeared to him previously was chapter 7. Now in chapter 8, we are in the third year of Belshazzar. Probably, again, these are rough estimates, but probably around 547 BC. So this vision in the third year of Belshazzar probably took place about 8 years prior to chapter 5. Chapter 5, of course, is when the writing on the wall occurred. That is when the Medes and the Persians came in and took over the kingdom, and that is when Belshazzar was slain and killed. So This vision occurs in the third year of Belshazzar, probably around 547 BC or so. So just to give you, and this of course is the time chart on page 10 of your syllabus. So then let's get started into this vision. He said, I looked in the vision, and while I was looking, I was in the citadel of Susa, which is in the province of Elam. And I looked in the vision, and I myself was beside the Ulai Canal. This is the map that's on page 6 in your syllabus, kind of blown up, just to show you. Now, here's the thing. Daniel at this time is in Babylon, all right? He's in Babylon. But in the vision, he finds himself in Susa, in the citadel. He's not in Susa. In the vision, he's in Susa, in the province of Elam. And I looked at the vision, I was by the Ulai Canal. So here is Susa. Susa is the capital city of what would become the Persian and the Achaemenid Empire. Daniel's in Babylon. It's about 230 miles between Babylon and Susa, just to give you an idea. So Daniel's in Babylon. In this vision, he finds himself in Susa. This is in the vision, in the citadel of Susa, which is in the province of Elam, which is the land of the Persians, eventually becoming the Achaemenid Empire. Now, I looked at many sources to find out. I didn't know what the Ulai Canal was. I don't know if this is accurate, but I'm giving it to you. It's on, actually, I think I have this in your page 56 of your syllabus. And this I found, I put on the bottom here. And I don't know how accurate it is. It's just the only thing I could find with the Ulai Canal. This I got from crossroadbible.net. There in the bottom of the screen is the location. So it shows that the Ulai Canal was this canal that went around the city of Susa. So that's the best I understand of what the Ulai Canal is. But in this vision, Daniel's looking in the citadel of Susa, and in the vision, he is beside the Ulai Canal, which is outside of the capital of Persia, out of Susa. So again, he's not there, but in the vision, he's there. Okay? So this is where he sees himself in this vision. So what did he see? First is the vision of the ram with two horns. In verse 3 and 4, he says, Then I lifted up my eyes and looked, and behold, a ram which had two horns was standing in front of the canal. Now the two horns were long, but one was longer than the other, with the longer one coming up last. I saw the ram butting westward, northward, and southward, and no other beast could stand before him, nor was there anyone to rescue from his power. But he did as he pleased and magnified himself. Now, one of the things that is in chapter 8, which you did not have in the dream of Nebuchadnezzar in chapter 2, and we did not have in the vision of chapter 7, is that in this vision, Daniel's actually given the interpretation, actually naming some of these countries, so we can know without any question who he's talking about. And when Gabriel, who I believe is the angel Gabriel, the same one that came to Mary at the time when Jesus was born, when Gabriel gives him the interpretation about who this ram with the two horns is, it's not left to any question. In verse 15 through 20, he says, When I, Daniel, had seen the vision, I sought to understand it. And behold, standing before me was one who looked like a man. And I heard the voice of a man between the banks of the Ulai, and he called out and said, Gabriel, give this man an understanding of the vision. So he came near to where I was standing. When I was frightened, and fell on my face. But he said to me, Son of man, understand that the vision pertains to the time of the end. Now, while he was talking with me, I sank into a deep sleep with my face to the ground, but he touched me and made me stand upright. He said, Behold, I am going to let you know what will occur at the final period of the indignation, for it pertains to the appointed time of the end. The ram, which you saw with the two horns, represents the kings of Media and Persia. Or I think you say Media, sometimes I say Medea. I'm not exactly sure where the accent should go on, but you know what I'm talking about. The Medes and the Persians. So he's given a vision of this ram, this vision being the Medes and the Persians. We know this actually took place in Daniel's lifetime in chapter 5. That night, the writing on the wall was the Belshazzar's, the Babylon was fallen, and his kingdom was given over to the Medes and the Persians. And we also know historically that the one that had the longer horn that came up last is the Persian Empire, which became the Great Persian or Achaemenid Empire. So that's who the Medes and the Persians are. So I'd like to take a little time to look at this kingdom historically. Here is the height of the Persian Empire. This map is on page 58 of your syllabus. So this, you can see that what the Persian Empire became. It overcame the Babylonian Empire, which was greater than the Assyrian Empire, and this was the height of the Persian Empire. And this says on this map that this was about 500 BC. I don't know, but this is an example of, gives you an area of this Persian Empire, or also called the Achaemenid Empire. Now, what I want to do is take time. Now, I don't know if I have this anywhere in your syllabus, but this Persian Empire, it's important, I think, for us to understand it. It lasted a long time. It lasted from Cyrus until Darius III, for over, what is that, 150 years or more? So it lasted a long time. And the rest of the Bible that we have, the canon of the scriptures, with all these remaining prophets that are in the Bible, all occurred during this Achaemenid Empire. So I think it's important for us to understand this, especially it becomes important later on when I get to chapter 9 and we look at trying to understand the 70 weeks prophecy. Also, when we get to chapter 11, it becomes very important as setting the start of the vision in chapter 11. So I thought, well, let's take the time now to kind of put in context these kings of the Persian Empire. And then I'm also right now going to kind of show you how the rest of the Old Testament, from Daniel until the book of Malachi, the prophets that are in there fit into the Persian Empire. I think for me, it helps to have this chronologically. So I'd like to kind of put this here for you. And to do this, you really want to read the book of Ezra. Ezra was a scribe who lived during the reign, during the time of Nehemiah, but really during the reign of Artaxerxes. You can see on this chart, Artaxerxes reigned from 465 to 425 BC. And Ezra actually comes into this is when he lived. He lived during this time. However, the book of Ezra actually records historically what happened 100 years before. It actually records what happened with the Jewish people from the time of Cyrus, when Cyrus declared and sent the Judeans back, until the present, well, not present day, but until Ezra's present day, 100 years later during the reign of Artaxerxes. So the first 6 chapters, by the way, of Ezra are all historical. He's looking back. And Ezra doesn't actually come into the picture in the narrative in Ezra until Ezra chapter 7. The first 6 chapters of Ezra are all historical. It is also believed, and I think this is true, that Ezra was probably the one who wrote the books of 1st and 2nd Chronicles. He recorded all the information that parallels to 1st and 2nd Kings and 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings. It's one of the last books written, I believe, is 1st and 2nd Chronicles, and I think it actually is last book in the Hebrew Tanakh. It's one of the later books, anyways. So Ezra is a very important person in how we have the current Old Testament canon of the scriptures. So Ezra's writings parallel what we're looking at here, and I think it's important to have a bit of understanding of what happens. A very key verse in the book of Ezra is what he states in Ezra chapter 6, verse 14. You can turn to it, or I have it here on the screen. And the elders of Jews were successful in building according to the prophesying of Haggai the prophet and Zechariah the son of Iddo. And they finished building according to the command of God of Israel and the decree of Cyrus, Darius, and Artaxerxes, king of Persia. So under these 3 rulers of Persia, Cyrus, Darius, and Artaxerxes, is when the rebuilding of Jerusalem came about, and the rebuilding of the temple and the restoration of worship back into the temple, which we know started what's called Second Temple Judaism. And this all started by these Persian kings sent Jews back to, well, I don't know if Darius sent them back, but Darius supported the building projects and sent them back to Jerusalem. A lot of times we say, oh, this was during the time of Ezra and Nehemiah. Well, what are you talking about? Are you talking about Ezra's historical writings? That's a whole 100-year period there. And sometimes we don't think about that when we just say, oh, it's during the time of Ezra and Nehemiah. Okay, a lot happens there. So let me give you a little idea of historically, in chronological order, of how these Old Testament books fit during this reign. That's why it's a very important understanding this Achaemenid, this Persian Empire, and the biblical records. First, the Cyrus is this Cyrus, who's also the Cyrus of the book of Daniel, who is also the Cyrus that's prophesied by Isaiah. Cyrus the Great, he was known as. And he reigned Persia from 559 to 529. He really only reigned over Babylon and the Judean people from 535 to 529 BC. And in 535 BC, Cyrus, under the reign of Cyrus, is when they were sent back. Then you had a king Cambyses. He ruled for about 8 years. And then you have Darius I. This is different than the Darius the Mede, who was, we looked at in chapter 6, who was in the book of Daniel, who was not a Persian, but he was a Mede. This is not that Darius. This is Darius I the Persian. And Darius I the Persian reigned from 521 to 486 BC, ruling over the Persian or the Achaemenid Empire. And that's Darius. And then the third king that was very influential into the restoration of the Jews and sending them back to Jerusalem is Artaxerxes. Artaxerxes ruled from 465 to 425 BC. And under Artaxerxes, in the 7th year is when Ezra came on board, and in the 20th year of Artaxerxes is when Nehemiah came. And with them along with the people that came from Cyrus, are the three times that the Jewish people in large numbers were sent back to the land of Judah. This occurred over a 100-year period of time, right? From Cyrus to the 20th year of Artaxerxes is when this happened. So let me show you how some of these books, because the books of Ezra, Nehemiah, Esther, Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi all fit somewhere in these first 5 kings of the Persian Empire. And then the Old Testament canon ends after Malachi. So let me show you some of this. Is just a quick little rundown, give you a little idea. And what I think I'll do is I'll make a screenshot of this and send this to you, Marianne and Bill, and you guys can pass it on of this, because I think it's just good to have for us with reference. First of all, under Cyrus in 535, the Judeans, this is after the 70 years of captivity. This is the end of the 70 years. And in 535 BC, the Jews are sent back to rebuild the temple. All right. And the leaders of the Jewish people from the line of David is Zerubbabel. He was a descendant of David. He's in the Christ line in Matthew chapter 1. And Zerubbabel was the governor or the leader. And then the priest was called Yeshua. Jesus, Joshua, was the priest that was sent with Zerubbabel in 535 BC with a whole bunch of people sent back to rebuild the temple in Jerusalem. All right. So they lay the foundation, wonderful, everything's great. This is all in Ezra, the book of Ezra. Then a king Cambyses comes on the stage in 529, only 6 years later, after they get there, and he puts a stop work order. They have to stop the building of the temple. They never finished it. So it sits dormant for about 10 years or so, where they start to work on the temple, and then nothing happens, right? So then, in the second year of this king Darius, comes the prophets Haggai and Zechariah. Haggai and Zechariah begin prophesying, and basically Haggai's like, who told you to stop building? Build the temple, right? And Zechariah gives all this prophecy about the restoration of the temple and future prophecy. And this occurs during the time of Darius, and construction on the temple resumes, starts in sometime in the second year of Darius. It's completed in the 6th year of Darius. I believe that reconstruction took 3.5 years. Isn't that significant? That it started in the second half, somewhere in the second year, finished in the 6th year of Darius. And this is the books of Haggai and Zechariah. Incidentally, just another one of these cool things, if you like to get into numbers, the temple is completed in 516 BC. Do you remember the year the temple was destroyed? It was destroyed in 586 BC. So the temple, they were without a temple for 70 years. Huh. Who'd have thought it? So the temple was destroyed in 586 BC. It is restored in 516 BC under the prophesying of Haggai and Zechariah, Zerubbabel and Joshua. They get the people and they start building the temple again. Hallelujah. All right, we have a temple. Jerusalem's still in mess. There's no real, nothing really being done in the temple yet, but it's built. All right. Then you get the reign of Xerxes. Xerxes, and we'll look at this in chapter 11. Xerxes, I think, was one of the great kings as far as expansion in the Persian Empire. I don't know if you're ever familiar with the movie 300, right? Where the 300 men of Greeks try to stop the great Persian army, and they was it Thermopylae, and they all get killed. Oh, sad thing. But then he goes in and he actually goes into Athens. He actually goes into the Greek Empire, and that is all under Xerxes. Do you know most people believe that the Ahasuerus, the one called Ahasuerus in the book of Esther, is this King Xerxes? And I think they're right. I think in the 3rd year of Xerxes, he has a problem with his wife Vashti, right? She's no longer going to be queen. And then Esther, through the whole situation, becomes queen. And the book of Esther occurs here during the reign of Xerxes. Also in the book of Ezra, it's called Ahasuerus. So the book of Esther fits here, sometime between 486 and 465 BC. Following Xerxes comes Artaxerxes. And Artaxerxes reigns for 40 years, from 465 to 425 BC. And according to chapter 7 of Ezra, in the 7th year of Artaxerxes, Ezra arrives in Jerusalem. So this has been almost, a long time, not quite 100 years, but a long time since the temple was built. And Ezra arrives, and what Ezra does, Ezra brings the word of God back to the temple. Ezra restores worship. Ezra becomes a teaching priest, and the temple actually becomes an active temple where they bring the law back in, and they begin, and he also brings a bunch of implements from Babylon, gold that Artaxerxes give him to reestablish the worship in the temple. And really, I think it's here with Ezra that you could say Second Temple Judaism started, because it's under the teaching of Ezra that they learned the law again, and the law and the word and the sacrifices and the proper order to be done things comes really with Ezra here in the 7th year of Artaxerxes. But the walls of Jerusalem weren't built yet. Actually, there's a little thing where Ezra starts to try and build it himself. We'll look at this later in chapter 9. But in the 20th year of Artaxerxes, Artaxerxes sends Nehemiah with a whole other group of Judeans back to Jerusalem, and they build the walls of Jerusalem. They actually build the city of Jerusalem, and now you have not only a temple, you have a city with walls, and the city becomes a city of Jerusalem with an active temple. And this is the time when Second Temple Judaism began. So when you say this happened during the time of Ezra and Nehemiah, well, what are you talking about? Because all this happened in the book of Ezra. So just to let you know, and this all happened under this Persian Empire, under these kings of Persia. So I'll send this to you guys in a slide. Also, I should tell you the book of Malachi. I believe the book of Malachi occurs, and it corresponds with the last chapter of Nehemiah. I think the book of Malachi occurs here also in this at this time. So that closes out the Old Testament canon. But so these Persian kings are a big deal for us to understand, especially, this is what happens after Daniel. This is what happens with the people of God after the book of Daniel. So there's a little history lesson, but I didn't know when I could share this. I thought I'd do it now while we're talking about this was it ram with 2 horns that is in this prophecy. This is the Persian Empire. So this is what he said. This ram is going to rule, and it rules for about 150 years or more. And then what happens in this vision of Daniel? The next vision is the male goat. The vision is described in verse 5 and 8. While I was observing, behold, a male goat was coming from the west over the surface of the whole earth without touching the ground, and the goat had conspicuous horns between his eyes. He came up to the ram that had the 2 horns, which I had seen standing in the front of the canal, and rushed at him in his mighty wrath. I saw him come beside the ram, and he was enraged at him, and he struck the ram and shattered his 2 horns, and the ram had no strength to withstand him. So he hurled him to the ground and trampled on him, and there was none to rescue the ram from his power. Then the male goat magnified himself exceedingly But as soon as he was mighty, the large horn was broken, and in its place there came up 4 conspicuous horns toward the 4 winds of heaven. We don't have to guess who the shaggy goat, who the male goat is, because Gabriel tells us in this vision in chapter 8, verse 21 and 22. The shaggy goat represents the kingdom of Greece. There you go. Who is the shaggy goat? Who is this goat that came from the west of the surface without touching the ground and has a conspicuous horn between his eyes? Who is it? With a large horn that's between his eyes is the first king. So, and then the broken horn, the 4 horns that rose, and it's represent 4 kingdoms which rise from his nation, although not with his power. So historically, who are we talking about? Alexander the Great. This is this large horn out of this first king of this empire. Alexander the Great, or Alexander the Third of Macedon, I wrote this up from stuff I read, was born in 356 BC. He began to reign at just 20 years old. In the year 386 BC, he was tutored by the Greek philosopher Aristotle. He began a series of military campaigns and expanded the Greek Empire to become one of the largest in history. Within only 10 short years, his empire stretched from Greece to northern India. Alexander, check this out, died in the palace of Nebuchadnezzar in the city of Babylon in the year 323 BC. The cause of his death is still unknown. Was it a natural death? Was it homicide? Did they poison him? It's not known for sure. But he dies in the city of Babylon, in the palace of Nebuchadnezzar, and he's only 32 years old. Alexander is the male goat and this horn of the male goat. Then what happened after the death of Alexander? By the way, there's Alexander's kingdom. And those are all, see all those little arrows? That's all supposedly what Alexander did over those 10 years. That's where he traveled, and he ends up in Babylon where he dies. So that was this Alexander the Great. In just 10 short years, he just took over this, and this became the kingdom of Greece. After his death, it says the broken horn and the 4 horns that rose in his place, 4 kingdoms will arise from his nation, although not with his power. And this is exactly what happened. The successors, or I think it's called the Diadochi, 4 kingdoms rise up, and this is in your syllabus. 4 kingdoms arise up from this kingdom of Alexander the Great. You have the kingdom of Macedon, which is basically Greek. You have the kingdom of Pergamon, which is like Asia Minor, the area of Turkey, that area. And then you have the Ptolemaic kingdom, which is basically the land of Egypt. And then you have the Seleucid Empire. And you can see the Seleucid Empire got the biggest chunk out of this breakup of these 4 generals of Alexander the Great. And we're really going to look at this in depth in chapter 11, because chapter 11, the entire chapter 11 is the wars between the Seleucids and the Ptolemies. It's really incredible prophecy that Daniel got about history that was hundreds of years away. But for this vision, here's these empires. Now, what does it say happens? It says, out of one of them came forth a rather small horn, which grew exceedingly great toward the south, toward the east, and toward the beautiful land. And this is the Seleucid Empire. And it was the biggest. It grew to the east, to the south, and toward the beautiful land, which is Israel. The Seleucids basically conquered Israel. Then later on, the Ptolemies and the Seleucids, they fight each other. And sometimes the Ptolemies are over Israel. Sometimes the Seleucids are over Israel. Sometimes the Ptolemies are over Israel. Sometimes the Seleucids are over Israel. They go back and forth. And we'll look at this when we get to chapter 11. So the founder was Seleucus, which is why it's called the Seleucid Empire. And then these are the different kings who ruled the Seleucid Empire. Antiochus I, Antiochus II, Seleucus 2, Antiochus 3, Seleucus 3, Antiochus 4. Most of the kings of this empire were called Antiochus, or they were called Seleucus. When you get to the Ptolemies, they're either called Ptolemy or it's the queen called Cleopatra. So, but we'll get to that in chapter 11. Right now, I want to focus on the Seleucid Empire and how this empire grows. And out of this empire, out of this one, comes this rather small horn. And this rather small horn is Antiochus IV, Antiochus Epiphanes. And he rules the Seleucid Empire from 175 to 164 BC. He ruled in the 137th year of the Seleucid or the Greek Empire. Just to let you know, we're going to look at the book of Maccabees here. And one of the things that gets a little confusing is that the book of Maccabees is written from the start of the Greek or the empire going forward. But historically, we look in BC. So while that one's counting up, we're counting down. So it gets a little confusing. But 175 BC is the 137th year of the Greek or Seleucid Empire. Okay? Just to let you know, when you're reading the book of Maccabees, to try and keep these things straight. So, what do we know about Antiochus Epiphanes? Well, here's what it says that he does in Daniel 8:10 through 18. This small horn grew up to the host of heaven and caused some of the host and some of the stars to fall to the earth. It trampled them down and even magnified itself to be equal with the commander of the host, and it removed the regular sacrifice from him, and the place of his sanctuary was thrown down. And on the count of the transgression, the host will be given over to the horn, along with the regular sacrifice, and it will fling truth to the ground and perform its will and prosper. Then I heard a holy one speaking, and another holy one said to the particular one who was speaking, how long will the vision about the regular sacrifice apply, while the transgression causes horror, so as to allow both the holy place and the host to be trampled? And he said to me, for 2,300 evenings and mornings, then the holy place will be properly restored. Now, you can actually understand this, and I'll show you how to understand what we're talking about. First, here's the book of Maccabees, which is a summary of what we just looked at with this Greek Empire. And I'll read this 1 through 10. And it happened after the Alexander, son of Philip the Macedon, who came out of the land of Chittim and had smitten Darius, king of the Persians and Medes, that he reigned in his stead the first over Greece, and made many wars and won many strongholds, and slew the kings of the earth, and went through the ends of the earth and took spoils of many nations, insomuch the earth was quiet before him. Whereupon he was exalted and his heart was lifted up, and he gathered a strong host and ruled over countries and nations and kings who became tributaries unto him. And after these things he fell sick and perceived that he should die. Wherefore he called his servants, such as were honorable and had been brought up with him from his youth, and parted his kingdom among them while he was yet alive. So Alexander reigned 12 years and then died. After his servants bare rule, everyone in his place, and after his death they were all put crowns upon themselves. So did their sons after them many years, and evils were multiplied in the earth. And there came out of them a wicked root, Antiochus, surnamed Epiphanes, the son of Antiochus the king, who had been a hostage of Rome, and he reigned in the 137th year of the kingdom of the Greeks, which is 175, which equals 175 BC, if you're paying attention, or if you want to write that down. The 137th year of the Greek kingdom is 175 BC on our calendar. All right. So this is the book of Maccabees. You could read the whole. It's really, book of Maccabees is actually kind of a nice historical read if you want to read the whole thing. So what is this 2,300 evenings and mornings? What are we talking about? I'd like to explain this. It removed, talking about what Antiochus does, it removed the regular sacrifice from him, and the place of his sanctuary was thrown down. On the account of the transgression, the host will be given over to the horn, along with the regular sacrifice, and it will fling truth to the ground and perform its will and prosper. Then I heard a holy one speaking, and another holy one said to the particular one who was speaking, how long will the vision about the regular sacrifice apply while the transgression causes horror, so as to allow both the holy place and the host to be trampled? He said to me, for 2,300 evenings and mornings, then the holy place will be restored. Now, I used to have difficulty with this because I was trying to make this be the abomination of desolation that Antiochus Epiphanes set up. The problem with that is you can't get 2,300 evenings out of that. You don't have, it's shorter time period than that. From the time the abomination of desolation is set up until under what this is, this restoration is what we know today as Hanukkah. When the Maccabees came in and they kicked out Antiochus and they reestablished worship in the temple and restored it. So what are we talking about here? Well, it tells you what we're talking about is sacrifices for 2,300 evenings and mornings. A very, very unique term, but it actually is a biblical term. All right. And we get the understanding of it later on. But I wrote this, these are not referring to days, but in the context, these are referring to when this smaller horn removed the regular sacrifice, not when he set up the abomination of desolation, but when he removed the regular sacrifice. And a holy one asks, how long will the vision about the regular sacrifice apply? The response is for 2,300 evenings and mornings. Then the holy place will be properly restored. The evening and the mornings, what they refer to are the evening and mornings sacrifices, which the Jews offered daily according to the Mosaic law. And you get this from Exodus. Here is what the evenings and the mornings means. Exodus 29, 38 through 42. Now, this is what you shall offer on the altar. 2 one-year-old lambs each day continuously. The one lamb you shall offer in the morning, and the other lamb you shall offer at twilight or in the evening. And there shall be 1/10 of an ephah of fine flour with 1 flour in oil, 1/4 of a hin wine of a drink offering with 1 lamb. The other lamb you shall offer at twilight, and shall offer with it the same grain offering and the same drink offering in the morning for a soothing aroma and offering by the fire to the Lord. It shall be a continual burnt offering throughout your generations at the doorway of the tent and the meeting before Yahweh, where I will meet with you to speak with you there. So this is the evening and morning. It's the evening and morning sacrifice that they did in Jerusalem daily. They had a morning sacrifice, and then they had an evening sacrifice. So what this says is that the sacrifices are going to cease for 2,300 evenings and mornings, right? Okay. According to the book of Maccabees, sometime in the 145th year of the kingdom of Greece. Again, they're counting up, we count backwards, which on our calendar year would have been 167 BC. Sometime that year, Antiochus Epiphanes sends letters to Jerusalem to forbid the burnt offerings and sacrifices. He causes the burnt offerings and sacrifices to cease. And the way you figure this out is you go to, well, when did they get restored? They got restored under the Maccabees at the time that we call Hanukkah. So this would have occurred when Antiochus sent this letter to cause the sacrifices to cease, would have occurred on October 20th, 167 BC. That's when the evening and morning sacrifices were halted. Then we know from Maccabees chapter 1, moreover, King Antiochus wrote to his whole kingdom that all should be one people and everyone should leave his law So all the heathen agreed according to the commandment of the king. Yea, many also of the Israelites consented to his religion and sacrificed unto idols and profaned the Sabbath. For the king had sent letters by messengers unto Jerusalem and the cities of Judah that they should follow the strange laws of the land and forbade the burnt offerings and sacrifices. This occurred first. And I believe that occurred in October of that year, what we would call October, that they should profane the Sabbath and the festivals. Then a few months later, on the 15th of Kislev, which would have been December 6th, 167 BC, Antiochus sets up the abomination of desolation in the temple. But the daily sacrifice had already been halted months earlier. And this is from Book of Maccabees, chapter 1. On the 15th day of the month Kislev, in the 450th year, they set up the abomination of desolation upon the altar. Then we know from chapter 4 of the Book of Maccabees that after the Maccabean revolt, the daily sacrifice was restored. On the 25th of Kislev, in 148th year, which would have been December 13th, 164, this begins the tradition of Hanukkah. And this is in the Book of Maccabees, chapter 4, now on the 5 and 20th day of the 9th month, which is called the month Kislev. In the 480th year, they rose betimes in the morning and offered sacrifice according to the law upon the new altar of burnt offerings, which they made. So the daily evening and morning sacrifices were halted on October 20th, 167 BC, and on December 13th, 164 BC, the daily sacrifices were restored according to the AD BC calculator, which we are going to look at in depth when we get to chapter 9. The number of days between October 20th, 167 and December 13th, 164 is 1,150 days, or 2,300 evening and mornings. That's how you get the 2,300 mornings. Work it. It really fits. That Daniel got the exact time of when these sacrifices were going to stop and when they were going to be restored under this king Antiochus, who was this small horn who rose up. Josephus refers to this period of time in the War of the Jews as 6 years, as a year, 3 years and 6 months. And actually, if you do the Hebrew calendar, it's within 42 months. This is a 42-month period between those on the Hebrew calendar, but that's a whole nother story. So, in this amazing prophecy in 8, Daniel is given specific details about the coming Persian and Greek empires, and specifically the Greek Seleucid kingdom, and what would happen to the Jewish people, and the abomination of desolation. However, there is more in this prophecy, which I believe telescopes to a future event that has not yet occurred. Because in the interpretation, he says, some understand the vision pertains to a time of the end. In verse 19, he says it pertains to the appointed time of the end. And in verse 24, it says, for it pertains to many days in the future. There is a future event that is still going to come. In the interpretation of vision, it seems that the explanation changes from this little or small horn that rises out of the Greek Empire to a future king that's going to arise at the end time. I think in the first part of this, you're talking about Antiochus Epiphanes. I think the second part of this, it's talking about this one that we looked at in chapter 7, this little horn that is yet to come at the end of the age. Just look at what it says here, because it's different. It says in verse 23 through 25, in the latter period of the rule, when the transgressors have run their course, a king will arise, insolent and skilled in intrigue. His power will be mighty, but not by his own power, and he will destroy to an extraordinary degree and prosper and perform his will. He will destroy mighty men and holy people, and through his shrewdness, he will cause deceit to succeed by his influence, and he will magnify himself in his heart, and he will destroy many while they are at ease. He will even oppose the prince of princes, but he will be broken without human agency. I don't think Antiochus Epiphanes withstood the prince of princes. I think this little horn at the end of the age is going to oppose Jesus Christ, the Prince of Princes. I know he is. And he's not going to be destroyed by just any human agency. He's going to be destroyed by Jesus Christ, right? With the sword coming out of his mouth that we looked at, right? So I think it jumps. So you have an example under Antiochus Epiphanes of what will be in the future. And we know from the words of Jesus that whatever happened with Antiochus Epiphanes, Jesus says there's something that coming. Because remember, the Gospel of Matthew is in the New Testament. It's in the AD. It's not in BC. And when Jesus spoke at the Mount of Olivet, he said, the gospel of kingdom shall be preached in the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. Therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation, which was spoken through Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place, so according to Jesus, it hadn't taken place yet. It is yet to take place in the future. And I think Antiochus Epiphanes will happen there. And we'll look at that in more detail in chapter 11, because it goes into much more detail about what happens with Antiochus Epiphanes and the abomination of desolation. So there will be more about this in future sessions. And in verse 27, Daniel said, I was exhausted. I hope you're not exhausted. And I hope you're not sick. But Daniel was exhausted and sick for days after this. And then I got up again and carried on the king's business, but I was astounded at the vision, and there was none to explain it. I've done the best to explain the best I understand of that. So I'm pretty astounded at the vision myself. I think it's pretty amazing. So next time in segment 11, well, first of all, for review, here is things you can review. Again, if you want to read the book of Maccabees, it's a good read. I mean, if you like history, it's not too hard to read. Chapter 1, and that's in your appendix 2. Also, you can read Josephus on the Word of the Jews. I just have a little section of that, which is on page 72 in appendix 3 of your appendices. So those are things to read, and those are the verses that we looked at tonight. So that's segment 12. And next week, we will continue on in Daniel chapter 9 with segment 13. So exciting stuff.